Good evening, everyone. Time for another silver update. Now, this is the 1 hour chart of silver provided by netdania.com. You can click on the link below. You can see the major trend line going back to the beginning of June, and it's been fairly consistent. You can see that our break out of this pennant, which I had been predicting would happen sometime this week, did occur, and it went right along with the trend line. We could get a correction back to this trend line, but then again, we might actually, which is very common in bull markets, we might begin to establish another trend line and get a rise, something like that. So that's quite possible. The other thing that's really important here to note is the volume and where it comes in. So you can see one of the big volume spikes is right there, and of course that's on major buying. The other really big one is here, that's on major buying. This one is an attempted smackdown that failed, and of course we had a recent one here with the stock market sell-off. That's very common. They use deflation scares, and in the past those have cracked the metals, but sometimes they have to get very serious about it. So we see those types of gyrations in the stock market, and then of course we have a fairly decent amount of volume coming in here on the breakout today. Now the question is, how much is this? Are these buyers? Are they serious? Now we know from the amount of silver that's out there, right here you could be looking at the end of the whole game, because if even just 80% or 90% of these people decided to take delivery of the silver that they purchased at these prices, then that's it. It's game over. The silver isn't there to deliver. And we're talking about not too many billions of dollars. So it's quite possible that it could be endgame. Now we have the mysterious comments by W, who was interviewed. There was an interview with both V and W. I'm sure many of you heard that. I had it posted on the blog. And W was alluding to some kind of silver signal. Now, I don't know what that signal is, and he implied that there was some type of market signal that the insiders were giving to each other, that silver was going to take off. I think he gave a date of July 15th to be the beginning of a major bull move in silver. That's what I took it to mean, but I may be wrong. Apparently, a later interview with him, the rumor is, was spiked. I don't know the truth behind any of that. But it is very interesting to see the beginnings of this type of rally. Now, I want to show you the chart of, we'll go to the transports, because that's the one that's been really frantic in its movements. And let's take the volume off here and move in a little bit closer. So if we go into the 5-minute, you can see these types of crazy movements. This sell-off here, which continued, this was through 2 days of this period, it coincided with an attempted smackdown of silver. Of course, then we had a snapback rally. We see that in stocks all the time, where they just turn on a dime and rally. You can see that we're talking about almost 200 Dow points on the transports. So that's 200 points is going to be, say, 2.5% or something like that. Not major percentage moves, but still, when we look at the overall distance that this market has traveled, you know, it's just not really even significant. But it did bounce back, and of course silver and gold, of course, as well, bounced back and continued to rally. We're seeing that in gold as well, and that's starting to shape up to be a very bullish pattern in gold. And of course the MACD Very importantly, now I've talked a lot about the monthly MACD in silver specifically, but you can see we're verging on a cross of the MACD, the monthly, in gold. And we're right at the zero line, just crossed it actually. You can see 2.167 cross of the zero line in gold. And the last time that that happened was near the top here. If we go out and look at silver, it's quite a different story. You can see that pretty much there's really only one fake out here. Other than that, a major cross up of this MACD occurred back here, and that was when the 2009 rally was starting to get legs, and that's it went sideways for a while, and then of course you can see it just launched into a moonshot. So are we going to repeat that? Very well could be. Wouldn't surprise me to see silver up at $26 in a matter of days. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Then again, there could be a smackdown. We just don't know what they're going to do. Now I want to cover some kind of strange stories that we have just to show you that these times nothing really is what it appears to be. Of course, you remember that we covered the CYNK story, and CYNK actually hit a high today of 21.95. You can see it closed at 14.71. I think the market cap that I saw at one point was $6 billion. Now, not much else has come out about this story. No one really knows who is behind it, except supposedly there's one employee. But this is just a sample of the type of stuff that goes on in these crazy fake markets that we have, and of course completely captured regulators who really don't do anything but, as I've said before, arrest guys who run penny stock schemes from their basement. But when we're talking billions, of course, nothing happens. Now, there is a hint at one of these articles, and I wanted to point out these articles to you. This is really interesting because if you'll remember, it was initially covered by Seeking Alpha. You can see on June 18th, CYNK Technology promoters push market cap to $655 million despite $39 in assets. So this is the original story. I believe that Zero Hedge picked it up the next day. Now, it's interesting that Zero Hedge is not cited on here. Of course, Yahoo apparently doesn't consider Zero Hedge to be a legitimate news source, which I think is absolutely laughable, because the only halfway decent and reliable financial news out there is on Zero Hedge or other sites like it. But I wanted to point out to you here the next story. They do cover Business Insider. So we got Business Insider covered it on July 19th. And now you can see them piling in here. You can see we've got Market Watch, we've got Barron's, we've got CNBC, we've got Bloomberg, we've got CNN Money, we've got Yahoo Finance. So if you want to get an idea of the captured puppet media, financial media, there they are. The only reason they're covering this story is because they're so left behind they have to. And that is a striking statement about the state of affairs in our captured media, captured and controlled corporate media that doesn't talk anything about corruption in government or all the things that we talk about daily in the alternative media. They don't talk about any of it until they're forced to. So that's just another example of how the mainstream media is dying. They have absolutely no credibility. Now, this story is another one from Simon Black, and this is talking about Bulgaria's banks. Genius. IMF pronounces Bulgaria's banks safe just 2 weeks before bank run. Earlier this summer, IMF bureaucrats went to Sofia, Bulgaria to study the country's economic progress, and roughly a month ago they released an official report which stated, among other things, that Bulgarian banks are stable and liquid. Does that sound familiar? Remember the rating agencies? Remember the bonds of the companies that went from AAA to F overnight? So the IMF has absolutely no credibility whatsoever. We know who these people are. They're a bunch of crooks and liars, and they're just a part of this bankster system, and this is proof that they have absolutely no credibility. Now, this last story I want to take you to is a story that I posted briefly on the blog, and of course Zero Hedge covered it today. And this is another mysterious JPMorgan death, and I wanted to cover some of the statements here because I put them in here just because some of the statements of this person, Julian Knott, is the person who, and I'm going to say allegedly because I don't know if this is true or not, allegedly was involved in a double suicide or suicide murder, whatever you want to call it. Shot his wife, shot himself, supposedly. That's the story. But the thing I wanted to look at here is some of the statements by his daughter especially. Some of these statements struck me as very, very strange. And we'll read these here. In an Instagram post, daughter Kaylee Knott wrote, quote, "Although I am heartbroken that they will never see me graduate college, will never be here to see me get married or be grandparents for my children, I can still have my inner peace knowing that they are now stress-free in a much better place." Now that's fairly common for people to say someone's in a better place, but stress-free, that's kind of a hint at something. The next quote, "The man who grew up with absolutely nothing can now say he can do whatever the expletive he wants. Has shown his family the world and he isn't stopping there," she wrote. That is a very strange statement for somebody to make who just lost her father and mother. The next one, in her latest post announcing her parents' death Sunday, the teen said she and her brothers will be just fine with our angels watching over us. And you'll see what I'm implying when we talk about this. Referring to her two teenage brothers, she wrote, "Now it's just me and my brothers and Betsy. We will be just fine with our angels watching over us. Life is so incredibly beautiful, and I can't wait to see what the world has in store for me. Rest in peace, Mommy and Daddy. Stay close." Okay. So, after pondering this stuff for a day or so, thinking about this, I am definitely starting to wonder, well, I'm not a person who's really big on the good guy, bad guy scenarios. Now, there's a lot of good guy, bad guy, I'll say theorists out there. You've got the Benjamin Fulfords of the world who tell us that there is some type of white hat, white dragon, good guy society in Asia, supposedly, who are going to come and bring to justice all these murderous banksters. That's the theory. Another one who has been interviewed recently on SGT Report is Karen Hoods, who tells us that the IMF is going to come to the rescue and give us a new world currency that's backed with gold. Another one that I would cite is someone I have great respect for, by the way. I don't happen to agree with everything he says, is Bix Weir, and he's continually telling us that there are these good guys out there waiting to take down the bad guys. I tend to disbelieve those theories, just like I don't really believe there are any good countries, but they're all bad. I'm pretty sure that most of these insiders are all bad, but I could be wrong. So the speculation here that I'm thinking about, is it possible, and that's why I put this statement down here, Or perhaps these are fake deaths and they're now under witness protection. So if you think about it in those terms, if there really are some good guys who are involved in this thing, let's say, for example, that there are investigations into the banks. We've heard a lot about that in Europe and Deutsche Bank, etc. And if there really are, a lot of the speculation has been, well, we think that these banker or bankster suicides or apparent suicide, possible murders, are attempted cover-ups to keep the people in the know from singing to authorities. The speculation is that these people have begun to talk to the authorities, and a message is being sent to other people out there who may speak to authorities, and basically the message is going to be, if you cooperate with the authorities in bringing down the banking cabal, you are not going to survive to give your testimony. Now that's kind of the typical alternative media conspiracy type of interpretation of these events. But what I'm starting to think perhaps may be the case, especially with these very strange statements, that honestly when you look at them and read them again, they seem to be statements by someone who knows that her parents are in another place. In other words, witness protection, perhaps. Wouldn't it be best, if you're going to have a big investigation that's going to bring down the entire banking system of the world, wouldn't you put your witnesses in protection where you actually declared them dead and got the world to believe that they aren't alive anymore, and therefore it's not very likely that someone that they might implicate is going to try to bump them off because they're already convinced that they're dead? So that's just a theory. I'm not really sure if it's true, but I think if we went and reviewed a lot of these bankster, suicide, murder-suicide situations, we might find that there isn't a lot of evidence. I don't really know. I'm just speculating. If that's the case, that's a positive thing. Then that means there really are some people out there who are trying to bring to justice the banksters. I still have my doubts, but that's one piece that kind of makes me lean the other way. Maybe they're right. So back to the silver chart. We are at a very, very key juncture here because we have a pennant that we formed, and we had a very, very clear breakout from that pennant. And that is a standard, typical type of pattern that you see in bull markets. They often move in a series of pennant formations. We saw that recently with Bitcoin. Bitcoin was moving when it was in its bull phase, was moving in a series of these pennants. And that, although a lot of people don't agree with it and a lot of people don't like the market mechanisms and everything else, probably one of the most honest markets that's out there, because you can't counterfeit a Bitcoin. And so we're seeing that activity begin in silver. Like I said before, if even a percentage of the people who are buying these silver contracts decide to stand for delivery, I'm totally convinced that it will be game over. I don't know how much silver, physical silver, there really is on the COMEX that can be delivered against these contracts, but I don't think that it's very much. As I've said before, it makes sense to me that if you're going to have an honest market in commodities, then just as the people who are going long the commodity and buying it with cash should have to put up a percentage of the cash, and maybe quite a bit more than 5%, then the people who are selling the commodity should have to post a certain amount of that commodity and prove that they actually have it. Because if you don't have that, then you really just have people trading paper back and forth. And as I pointed out last time and another time, that very mysterious statement by the CME that the price of silver is not determined by physical supply, in essence, is a very telling one. It may be coming out very, very soon that this entire market, just like so many of these other stories and so many of these other ratings that we have seen, are actually fake. And we'll talk to you next time.